Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX World. My name is Vineet Malhotra and let's start with the top stories. Russia spy chief Sergei Naryshkin said he had a phone call with CIA Director John Ratcliffe. Both agreed to stay in touch and speak directly when necessary to address key issues. At least 4 Palestinians were killed in Israeli air raids on northern and southern Gaza. Medical sources have confirmed this, and the strikes are a part of a wider attack across the Strip. They have been reportedly left over 20 dead now. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu attended a secret court hearing seeking to postpone his testimony in his corruption trial. His lawyers argue urgent national security duties amidst the Iran conflict justify the delay. Trump's big beautiful bill has now been narrowly advanced after the Senate vote to open debate. It must still pass a full Senate vote. If approved, it returns to the House for final approval, where key Republican opposition could stall it again. A Ukrainian F-16 pilot has died defending against a huge Russian onslaught with hundreds of drones and missiles. Officials have confirmed President Zelensky have urged more Western help as strikes damage homes, infrastructure and injure at least 7. At least 3 people were killed and many others injured in a crowd surge during a Hindu festival near a temple in Odisha, India on Sunday. In fact, it was reported that the stampede occurred amidst a religious gathering in the coastal state's capital. Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez concluded their extravagant wedding in Venice as hundreds of protesters gathered to denounce mass tourism, soaring rents, and social inequality. The No Space for Bezos march attracted around 700 locals who criticized his connections to Trump and Venice's reputation for elitism. The British government issued a statement after the deaths to IDF chants were broadcast at Glastonbury Music Festival as the music artist Bob Vylan performed. The British government said it will launch an investigation into the event, with the festival also condemning the actions. All right, starting with our top story. In a new development in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russia spy chief Sergei Naryshkin has said he spoke with CIA Director John Ratcliffe and agreed to keep open lines of communication. Naryshkin told Kremlin state television that both sides agreed to call each other at any time to discuss mutual interests. His remarks mark a rare public acknowledgement of direct contact between the heads of 2 of the world's most powerful intelligence agencies. Russian media last reported a similar call between Naryshkin and Ratcliffe in March this year. The SVR, which succeeded the KGB's first chief directorate, has a long history of running deep cover spies, including American traitors like Julius Rosenberg, Robert Hansen and Aldrich Ames, who caused massive breaches in U.S. intelligence. Meanwhile, Germany's Foreign Minister Johann Vadful has said that Russia's war on Ukraine is Germany's top foreign policy priority and the greatest threat to European security. Ukraine has lost both a pilot and an F-16 fighter jet during what officials are calling Russia's largest aerial assault since the war began. According to Ukraine's Air Force, the pilot shot down 7 airborne threats before his jet was damaged during the final engagement. He managed to steer the aircraft away from civilians but couldn't eject in time. All right, Mr. Gilbert Doktorov, Russian affairs expert, is joining us from Brussels at this point in time. Mr. Doktorov, appreciate you being here. While there are multiple equations which are transpiring at the same time. First up, let's talk about the aggression that is increasing on behalf of Russia towards Ukraine, and secondly, also, sir, address this direct communication between Russia and the CIA. Is that a light at the end of any tunnel?
No, we start with the second question you posed. It's very good that lines of communication are open between the heads of intelligence on both sides. It's very good that lines of communication are open between the top diplomats of both sides and also between the presidents of both countries. The greatest shame of the Biden administration was that it cut off all communications with Russia, all of them. And so there was possible to have misunderstandings with which could lead to great exchanges of hostilities without reason. That chance of mistaken understanding of what the other side is doing or intending is greatly diminished when they are in regular contact and also in emergency contact, as you mentioned in your report. So it is a positive thing. As regards the war in general, it's a war and people die. And the Ukrainians are very persistent. They are ignoring what normal military leadership does when it knows it's losing a war. It tries to stop the loss of life of its soldiers and its officers. Ukraine is not doing that. It is persisting in the war against all odds in the hope that someone in the West will bail them out, will give them the assistance that enables them to counter the Russians. That is an idle hope. It is an unrealistic hope. If anyone opens their eyes and looks at what happened at the NATO summit last week, it was clear that the Western countries would like Mr. Zelensky to disappear. They would like to put this behind them because it's an embarrassing loss. And most everyone who is the least bit realistic, or just who reads mainstream newspapers today, you don't have to go to the alternative media. Mainstream, like the Financial Times, are reporting on their front page. New York Times reporting on the front page that the Ukrainians are being battered on the front, on the lines in the Donbass. In these circumstances, normal leadership would call it a day, would sue for peace. Regrettably, the Ukrainians aren't doing that, and so you have losses like the one yesterday that you're reporting, an F-16 that was doing his job to try to bring down some of the Russian projectiles that were heading for various parts in the Ukraine. And I might note, yesterday's strike covered Ukraine to its western border. It was noted that some of the missiles or drones attacked west of Lvov. Now, what is west of Lvov? The Polish border. So the Russians have become much more aggressive, much more sure of themselves. And part of that is a result of the Israel-Iran war, which was a major distraction, not just for Western leaders, but for major media. The hostilities in Ukraine were moved from the front pages to page 23. That's to say, what the Russians are doing no longer has attracted the rapt attention of the editors, the journalists, and their readers or viewers on electronic media. And in that case, the Russians are doing what they should have done long ago. They have stepped up the level of fighting, the level of advance on the ground and in the air. And that's why you have these largest ever missile and drone attacks on Ukraine. The Russians would like to put an end to this war as quickly as possible.
So what do you make of Germany also prioritizing this war as an imminent threat to the safety and security of Europe? That's a big thing to say.
It is. But the reality is that Mr. Merz will not keep his chancellorship very long if he persists in that, and if he tries to implement what his defense minister Pistorius was proposing last week, namely to find the new soldiers that Germany needs to develop itself, to develop its muscles to where it was before it demilitarized following the end of the collapse of the Soviet Union. To restore that level of military strength, he has to have soldiers. Germany is down by 2/3 from the level of men in arms that it had in the last days of the Cold War. In order to return to something like that, you need soldiers. The soldiers are not volunteering, as Mr. Pistorius noted, and if they do not volunteer, then he wants to put in a military draft, obligatory service. If the government of Mr. Merz proceeds along that line, he will not be in office very long. The Financial Times, a newspaper which is notoriously anti-Russian and pro-Atlanticist, in their Friday edition, had a front page article describing the conflict within the Social Democrats, who are part of Mr. Merz's coalition government, how there's a conflict within that party over whether to follow the advice of Mr. Pistorius or to reject it. A majority of the socialists are backing Mr. Pistorius, who also comes from that same party and who served as defense minister under the last chancellor, Mr. Schultz. However, a significant minority, and that is not my description, that is the Financial Times speaking, a substantial minority opposed the draft and the rearmament. Keeping in mind that the German government only has a 17-vote majority in the Bundestag, in the Parliament of Germany, if there's a defection of those who disagree with the rearmament within the SPD, the socialists, then Mr. Merz's government will fall. And so the threat that he is raising, Germany rising to the defensive needs of Europe and of Germany itself against the Russians, is hot air.
Mr. Doktorov, appreciate you joining us, sir. Always a pleasure having you. Moving on, well, Iran has said that it is highly doubtful that Israel will maintain the ceasefire that ended an air war between the two countries. The comment has come from the Iranian Armed Forces Chief of Staff, and according to Saudi Arabia's Defense Minister, Prince Khalid bin Salman today has also said this. Abdul Rahim Mousavi has said that they have complete doubts about Israel's adherence to its commitments, including the ceasefire, and are prepared to give a strong response if it repeats the aggression. This comes after Rafael Grossi, head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, has stated in an interview that Iran has the capacity to start enriching uranium again for a possible bomb in a matter of months. Grossi has said that the US strikes on 3 Iranian sites last weekend had caused severe but not total damage, contradicting Donald Trump's claim that Iran's nuclear facilities were totally obliterated. Meanwhile, Argentina has condemned Iran for what it said were threats against UN nuclear watchdog chief. This came after Iran rejected Grossi's request to visit nuclear facilities bombed by Israel and the United States. And according to reports, Tehran has accused Grossi of betrayal of his duties for not condemning the Israeli and US strikes on Iran's nuclear sites this month, and Iranian lawmakers voted to suspend cooperation with the IAEA. Argentina's foreign ministry has expressed its support for Grossi and said that it categorically condemns the threats against him coming from Iran. And the ministry also urged Iranian authorities to guarantee the safety of the IAEA chief and his team. According to a statement on social media platform X, the statement, however, did not specify what threats Grossi had received. However, on Friday, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi criticized Rafael Grossi's push to inspect the bombed nuclear site, suggesting on social media that the IAEA chief's insistence was meaningless and possibly even malign in intent. Or Martin Sa Erez, international affairs expert, is joining us from Ecuador at this point in time. Martin, always a pleasure having you. Well, first up, let's look at the accusation. Iran believes that Israel is not going to live up to its commitment. Do you think they're right?
I think they're thinking that because they themselves violated the ceasefire. They fired rockets to Israel after the ceasefire entered in force. But what I think is true is that this ceasefire is absolutely going to be a short one. I don't think Israel is going to stay for a long time quiet after threats from Iran. What President Trump said about erasing the nuclear threat from Iran is partially true. These strikes, the US and Israel strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, they took back the nuclear program at least 5 years. But the problem is that the threat from a new nuclear bomb is not done. The root of the problem is still there. The Ayatollahs can absolutely have the capacity to rebuild it again. It will take a lot of time, maybe years, but it is a threat that is not absolutely erased from the map.
And Martin, let's also, talk about Iran not allowing the International, Atomic Association to inspect these sites. What does that tell you? That perhaps Iran has a lot more to hide than what the world can see and confirm.
Absolutely. I mean, this regime cannot be trusted at all. Iran, even though the Israeli intelligence is very accurate and they have been getting a lot of crucial information from the nuclear program from Iran, I think Iran still poses a huge threat to Israel and the West. Even though their program went back years ago, the main 3 nuclear facilities were destroyed. They still have the capacities, they still have the will, and they still have all of the sources to take it back, even if it takes a lot of years. So I think Iran is still a threat, and they're absolutely interested in rebuilding this program, and they're not going to allow the international community to inspect this because they know the international community is not going to allow this because they are doing absolutely illegal things and they're hiding crucial information.
Martin, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much. Moving on, Senate Republicans have narrowly advanced President Donald Trump's sweeping budget bill just days before their self-imposed July 4th deadline. In a 51-49 vote, the Senate agreed to begin debate on the nearly 1,000-page legislation, which includes major tax cuts and deep welfare reforms. 2 Republicans broke ranks to vote no, citing concerns over Medicaid cuts and the rising debt ceiling. The bill would extend Trump-era tax breaks and eliminate taxes on Social Security income, tips and overtime, but it also proposes sweeping Medicaid work requirements and changes to food stamp benefits. Democrats are pledging to stall the bill, demanding the full text be read aloud on the Senate floor. If it clears the Senate, it would return to the House, where Republicans remain divided over the Senate's revisions. A final vote could come within days as both parties brace for a major budget showdown. All right, Ross Feingold, the political analyst, is joining us from Taipei at this point in time. Ross, appreciate you being here. Well, this is a very ambitious bill, a bill that has divided Donald Trump and the richest man in the world as well, Elon Musk, who once again X'd or tweeted that, if this is not changed the way he wanted it, the way he wanted to run Doge, then the world, not only America, then the world is in trouble. What do you make of it?
Musk's opinion about this bill are probably not going to stop it from passing. President Trump wants to see it passed. The Republicans in the House of Representatives and in the Senate are very reluctant to go against Trump's wishes. The Republicans also have a majority, a bare majority. They can't spare many votes. But as of now, it looks like this is going to pass the Senate in the coming hours. It will go back to the House because the Senate version differs from the original House version. The House will pass the Senate version, and President Trump is going to declare a great victory. So Musk could complain about it, and frankly, I think Musk makes some valid points. It does look like this bill, in its current form, over the long term, will increase the U.S. budget deficit as well as the national debt. So I am sympathetic to Musk's concerns, but Musk's concerns are secondary to what President Trump wants. And Republicans in the House and Senate are going to line up behind President Trump.
Right. And Ross, Medicaid has always been an issue that has been debated and deliberated upon, even, when Obama's tenure or Joe Biden's tenure, with Obamacare, of course, being completely dismantled and being, I beg your pardon, rebuked by Donald Trump. What kind of a change do you think this is likely to bring to this controversial subject?
Well, the bill in its current form has some significant changes. Most notably, it's going to reduce the amount of federal government financial aid to the state governments for Medicaid costs. And there are even some Republican senators who were concerned about the financial impact on their state, most notably among them the 2 Republican senators from Alaska, and they demanded some changes to the bill that would give Alaska specifically some better treatment than the rest of the states. So it does look like states are going to carry a more significant financial burden going forward for Medicaid costs. Now, the reason why Republicans in the House or Senate are reducing the federal government share of Medicaid payments is because they need to find a way to pay for the tax cuts that are part of the bill, because the bill is going to reduce the tax income that the federal government takes in every year. So they do have to reduce the costs to the federal government, and they focused in on Medicaid, where they do believe that there's a lot of waste and fraud.
Donald Trump's ratings have taken a hit in the last few days. How crucial is this particular bill to Donald Trump and the way he's tried to run America in the last few months?
We have a phrase in America that we often use. It's called political capital. President Trump was elected. The Republicans did take the majority in both the House and Senate. President Trump has political capital, and now is the time to spend it during the first few months or the first year of his presidency, when he has majorities to work with in both the House and the Senate. So President Trump is spending that political capital. He wants to be able to say that he brought a tax cut, and the bill will bring a tax cut to most Americans. Now, that we could get into arguments whether wealthy Americans get a better benefit than lower income Americans, but broadly speaking, this bill will bring a tax cut to most Americans. And for President Trump, that's a good way to spend his political capital. And there's also an argument to be made that the tax cut to corporations and the other benefits that changes to the tax code that will be made by this legislation will spur investment. It will lead to higher economic growth. So President Trump is all in on this. It's really the biggest achievement of his second term, most likely. And again, that's why he's spending all his political capital on this bill.
Ross, always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for being here. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news and updates from around the world. Thank you for watching.